Welcome back to another one, guys. I'm Booster John, and today I'm going to be telling you guys about the top 5 worst cars that I've ever owned. I have owned 14 cars in my lifetime. Every single one of them has been a turd in one way or another. But today, we are just talking about the top 5, the worst of the worst. Number 1 being the absolute worst, and number 5 being the best of the worst, I guess. Now we're gonna start it off kind of light here. The first 2 are a little bit light, but I promise this scales up extremely quickly. Number 5 is my 2013 Ford F-150. This is a car that I owned for almost the longest period of time out of any of the cars I've ever owned, and you guys barely saw anything about it. I was planning on doing some like overlanding stuff with it. I was planning on doing some like truck build stuff. I kind of wanted to do truck content, but it was my daily driver. God, this truck was such a turd. I sold an S2000 to buy this truck. It was leaking oil from the turbos. It was leaking oil from the back of one of the cylinder heads. It had cam phaser issues, which a shop quoted me $4,500 to fix. On Thanksgiving Day, I was at my mom's house in Indiana, which is about 3.5 hours from where I live in Illinois. My brother and I drove my truck out there, and I had to be home for work on Friday after Thanksgiving. I know, ridiculous, but that's just Tesla policy. So my brother and I start driving home from Indiana on the night of Thanksgiving in my truck, and I got a flat tire halfway home. I'm an hour and a half away from home, flat tire, and I have no spare. Sure, a flat tire is not really the end of the world, but when I don't have a spare and I also already have all these other issues going on with the truck, it's just such a kick in the nuts. It's so hard to recover from. We left the truck at a truck stop that night being held up by a scissor jack, the one that comes with the car. We took the wheel off and we brought it home with us. I dropped the wheel off at a tire shop before work the next day, had them throw on a new tire, picked it up at my lunch break, and then immediately after work, my girlfriend and I drove an hour and a half back out to this truck stop, threw the wheel on, and then we drove the truck home. Anyway, that is why the F-150 is number 1 on my list. You guys probably didn't know about a lot of that stuff, but unfortunately, that is a big reason why I sold it. Let's move on to number 4. All right, this car is really hard for me to talk shit about because it objectively was such a turd. It was my actual first car, so I have a really hard time talking shit about it because subjectively, it has a special place in my heart. The car that I'm talking about is one that you guys have never even seen on my YouTube channel. It is my 2001 Volkswagen Jetta 2.0 liter naturally aspirated manual Jetta. I have never ever talked about this car on my channel ever before. This car was such a turd for so many reasons, but like I said, it was my first car where I had just graduated high school and I had like freedom. I had my own car. I could do what I wanted for the first time in my entire life. And so I have some of my best like teenage memories with this car. It was my first manual car. My mom and I picked it up from downtown Chicago in the middle of rush hour traffic, and I had to drive it home because my mom didn't want to. I have never driven manual in my life before this, except for the test drive where I stalled 3 times. And I drove it all the way home from Chicago rush hour traffic to my mom's house in Des Plaines, which was about a half hour, 45 minutes, and then immediately hopped in it and drove it to work, which was another 30 minutes away. That car was something else. Like I said, I have some of the best memories in it, but it was an absolute turd. It was rusty, it leaked oil, it threw check engine lights all the time, as Volkswagens do. I plasti-dipped the wheels, I plasti-dipped eyebrows onto the headlights. This car was seriously like, it was a bad phase for me, guys. I tried taking it to car meets. I thought it was cool. Nobody else thought it was cool. And you know what? I'll say this. I do really like the Mark IV Jetta if it's the 1.8 turbo, but the 2 liter, it just is such a rough car, man. Like, it was bad. I loved it. I still love that car. One of my favorite cars I've ever owned just because of my experiences with it. But anyway, that is number 4 on this list, and this is where the list starts to get wild. The 3rd worst car I've ever owned in my entire life was my black E Coupe. I believe it was a model year 2000. I owned it for 2 months, and it was for sure the worst shaped car I've ever purchased in my entire life. I don't know what I was thinking when I bought it. Actually, I do know what I was thinking when I bought it. I thought that Kearney, my girlfriend, and I were going to restore it as kind of a couples project, but I did not fully expect it to be as bad as it was when I bought it.
So how much did you pay for this?
$8 and a pack of Doritos.
they robbed you.
I drove 3 hours on a Thursday evening to South Haven, Michigan to buy this car. It was snowing when I got to South Haven, Michigan. The car had bald tires, it had suspension knocks and clanks, it had exhaust leaks, it had oil leaks, it had timing issues, and it was overheating. The rust was horrible. It had no radio, and when I was driving it home from South Haven, Michigan, it started full-fledged blizzarding and I was on bald tires. It was just such a shit show from the absolute beginning. I am so glad that I got rid of that car. The second worst car that I have ever owned. I don't think you guys are gonna see this one coming. Nick, I'm sorry to put this on the list, man. It was such a gem, but I just have to. My 1998 Honda Civic EK hatchback. Guys, this car holds a special place in my heart as the worst car, second worst car, I guess, I've ever owned in my entire life, because it was actually the best car I've ever owned in my entire life that gave me the most amount of issues that I've ever had from any car ever.
No way.
When I bought this car, I was looking for the most immaculate Civic that I could possibly find. I wanted something super clean, super set up, already having a B series, an H series, or a K series engine, something that I could just buy and take straight to the track. You know, maybe do like brake pads, whatever, some track setup mods, and then go straight to the racetrack. I found this EK hatch for sale in Arkansas. I bought a plane ticket, flew out, paid the previous owner almost $8,000 for this Honda Civic. It was mint, boys, mint. Such a clean car. You guys that watch the series, you guys know what happened. You guys know about the car. I drove the car 10 hours home, did a ton of work on it to get it ready for its first track day, which was Honda Meet 2022. Literally worked on this car during my lunch breaks in the parking lot at work when I worked for Tesla, pretty much every day. I trailered it out to its first track day using my F-150, and during its second lap of the entire weekend, it spun a rod bearing. Okay, great. So now I have paid almost $8,000 for a car that has a motor that blew up during its first track day within a month of me buying it. The previous owner was super cool and actually sent me back 500 bucks, which he did not have to do, but he did it. He was super nice about it. I appreciate you a lot. And one of you guys hit me up on Instagram and gave me a free H series engine for the car. I picked up the new motor, threw it in the car. It took me about 2 weeks to get that engine in the car, running and driving. Got all my stuff packed up with my girlfriend Kearney to head out to Gingerman Raceway for a track day weekend with Gingium. We hop in the car, we hop on the highway. We're driving through Chicago during rush hour traffic to get around Lake Michigan and over to Gingerman Raceway, and the car's alternator fails. The car starts dying. I pull to an exit ramp. It's an uphill exit ramp. The car completely shuts off on the exit ramp, and I'm stuck with cars honking behind me, people swearing at me because my car died on an exit ramp and the alternator failed. Luckily, a fellow Honda owner named Umair hopped out of his CRX and helped me push this car all the way around the corner to a safe spot where I could park it and get my situation sorted out. A couple trips to AutoZone later, and I replaced the alternator and ended up driving the car home, waited till the following morning, and then drove it out to South Haven, Michigan for the track day the following morning. Did the track day, zero issues on track, kinda. Was cutting out a VTEC, which was concerning because that could mean low oil pressure. Drove it home from the track day, and exactly 5 days later, the car got hit and run and totaled. I owned this car for 2 months. 1 whole month of its ownership was spent on jack stands pretty much while I was pulling the motor and getting a new engine into it. Spent almost $8,000 on the car. If we factor in travel costs, $8,000 on the car. Put almost $2 grand into it to get it ready for the track, and I got 1 track day out of it and 1 almost failed attempt at a road trip out of it. It sucks so much because I loved that car more than probably any other car I've ever owned. I absolutely adored that EK, and it was taken from me too soon, and it just is so sad. It's the second worst car I've ever owned, and I had a really hard time making this number 2. The worst car I've ever owned and this one were I was very close to switching them, but the worst car that I've ever owned fully deserves its spot at number 1 worst car I've ever owned, and that is my 2005 Mustang GT. Yes, guys, I owned a Mustang GT. Most of you guys probably will not remember that phase of my YouTube channel. I had just sold my 8th gen Honda Civic Si and a Dodge Dakota that I owned at the same time. I took the proceeds from the sale of both cars and I test drove a 2012 Mustang GT, which has a Coyote 5.0. It was a manual and I absolutely loved it. I actually still to this day really love that generation of Mustang. And when I was finally making a purchasing decision, I decided that it would make more sense, instead of financing a Coyote, it would make more sense for me to just buy cash a cheaper Mustang. So I settled on the 4.6 3-valve Mustang GT from 2005. It was a manual, and guys, that car has got to be the worst car that I've ever owned in my entire life. It is such a pile of trash. I'm sorry to any of you guys out there that own that car. You should probably try test driving something else, because I would rather daily drive a Camry than the 2005 Mustang GT. The thing is, there really wasn't even that much wrong with that car. It had a rust hole in the driver's floor. That was it. I fixed that very easily. Yeah, that seems like a big deal. It really wasn't. It was an easy fix. The body had zero rust. It was just some suspension surface rust in the car. It sounded really good, actually. I'll give it some credit in terms of the engine noises. It did sound really good. It was a loud V8, which was cool. But God, that car was so slow for a V8. The interior was absolute garbage, like just one of the worst interiors I've ever experienced in my entire life. And one story that I have with this Mustang GT that basically should have told me right off the bat that I had made a bad purchasing decision. It was just bad. It was bad juju right off the bat. It was my own fault too, so I'm blaming it on the car, but it was my own fault. I had just bought the car and I was about to turn 21, and I wasn't gonna have time to register the car before driving it all the way across the country to Colorado to turn 21 in Colorado, go out to bars with my girlfriend, and I didn't think I was gonna have time to register it before then. So I ignorantly bolted on my old license plate from my 2007 Honda Civic Si, my red one that some of you guys remember, the Coupe, the FG2. And I was like, oh, I'm so slick, I'm so clever, I'm new, like I'm young, I don't know anything about anything. And I got pulled over like 2 days after I bolted that plate on. The officer was not very nice to me. He was very mad. He was like, yo, is this a 2007 Honda Civic Si? And I was like, no. Yeah, he took my driver's license away, wrote me 2 tickets, and told me I had to be in court. So I was going to Colorado still. I went and registered the car and got a plate for it before I left for Colorado, but then I had to go to Colorado for my 21st birthday with no ID. Yep. And I forgot my passport, so I couldn't even use my passport as an ID. Oh, that sucks so much. That car is the worst car I've ever owned in my entire life, for sure. No matter how shit the situation was at the EK, I'm so disappointed in myself for buying a 3-valve Mustang GT. It's just cringe, and it's embarrassing for me to even think that I owned that car. So guys, that is the top 5 worst cars I've ever owned. Let me know in the comment section down below, what is the worst car that you've ever owned? Tell me your story. I'm super interested to hear. If you guys are interested in supporting my small business and supporting what I do, please consider checking out YouTube memberships. Link in the pinned comment down below to check out the tiers and the perks for you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for clicking that subscribe button and like button. We deserve nothing, earn everything.